Good day. Welcome to this Daily Maverick webinar, the Money Sense webinar, looking at the two-part retirement reform. We are talking today to Zarina Kamruddin, head of Fund Governance and Trustee Conduct at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, and Wayne Hiller van Rensburg, Executive Director at the Institute for Retirement Funds Africa. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Great. So our aim today with this discussion, discussing the two-part retirement reform, is to make sure that you, the viewer, leave this webinar a little bit better informed, knowing more so that you can do better with your funds. Please do share your feedback and your questions in the chat box. We'll try to get through as many of them as we can. And with that, let's kick off with an introduction to what led to the two-part retirement reform. Zarina, do you want to explain some of the thinking National Treasury had when they introduced the system?
Thank you, Nisa. So yes, if you think of the Treasury's journey of reforms, compulsory preservation has been part of that reform journey since 2012. And hence we saw the enactment of the default regulations in 2019, as well as annuitization in 2021. And of course, because we still have a huge issue in terms of only 6% of South Africans being able to retire comfortably, preservation, or to put it differently, pre-retirement leakage obviously required to be addressed. By the same token, another challenge that has faced us for a very, very long time has been the access challenge. For as long as I've been in this industry, which is approximately 20 years, there's been calls for access. And this call became more pronounced during the COVID-19 pandemic, as a result of which COSATU actually called for access to retirement funds. And they were supported by other labor federations, saying that because of the dire financial situation that members found themselves in, they wanted to access the retirement funds. But, as the saying goes, never let a good crisis go to a waste. So I think this saw the birth, essentially, of the two-part system. Because as you know, there are two components to it. So the one, yes, and I think there's been a lot of focus on the access component. But, also, I think it's important to note that it also brings with it the two-third compulsory preservation.
So going forward, just to extrapolate a little bit, from 1st of September, you will have two parts in your retirement savings, which means 2/3 is compulsory. It goes towards your retirement. You cannot touch that until you retire. And 1/3 will be what is being referred to as the savings part, which you will be able to withdraw from once a year. Wayne, can you just talk us through what is the vested component that it gets referred to?
I think this is where it gets interesting and possibly a little bit complicated, because we're going to, and I think the first thing we need to accept is that this is a 40-year transition period, probably for anybody who's in the system. So for everybody who's starting work, what you said now is absolutely true. 1/3 can be accessed as cash, 2/3 will have to be used at retirement. For those of us who've been in the system for a while, the vested pot talks to all those benefits that we've built up until the 31st of August or the 1st of September. And those things, those benefits that we saved up there are treated differently. And I don't want to preempt anything, but I think just this example will hopefully explain what I'm trying to say, is that if I have been on a retirement fund for 15 years, I'm just using an example, and on the 1st of September, I've saved up my 200,000 Rand. That 200,000 Rand, when I resign today, I'd be able to take that full 200,000 Rand in cash, pay the tax. I mean, there's always tax. And those kind of benefits, that right to do that is always going to be with me as long as I'm as long as I'm in the system, and that's why it's called the vested right. And it really talks to that kind of thing. I hope it's not too flowery, the explanation I gave, but then from the 1st of September, this new system applies to everything that I'm building up.
Okay. And then let's talk about from the 1st of September, there's seed funding available because now from the 1st of September, I will have a savings pot and a retirement pot. But I mean, I haven't put anything into that retirement fund, obviously, until the end of September, and it's not going to be 1 month's contribution. So what is the seed funds available? Zarina, do you want to take that one? Sorry.
Yes, certainly. So the seeding, so Wayne has explained the vested pot, I think, quite beautifully. So even though it's called the two-pot system, there are actually 3 pots created, for those of us, as Wayne explained, who are currently, in service and we've been contributing to a fund. But of course, in order to access the savings component or savings pot, something needs to be in it. So what the unions actually fought quite hard for that, was that there should be a seeding amount available. They wanted some amount available. But of course, because both pots would otherwise have been empty, so seeding is provided for in the legislation. So what will happen is that from the vested pot, there'll be 10%, but capped at 30,000 Rand, that will be transferred to the savings pot, which from the 1st of September, members would be able to access. But also the caveat is, of course, that the administrator must be ready. There's that probably an application process. A tax directive has to be, obtained from SARS. But that is really what the seeding entails. And of course, cognizance must be taken of the fact that in as much as you can withdraw the seeding from the savings pot, then of course, if you do that, your, the vested pot, of course, has reduced. But then, of course, your savings pot, whatever you take out, your overall retirement benefit will also reduce by whatever you take out. But I trust that covers the seeding.
Yeah. And then also just to confirm with the seeding amount so you talked about a seeding amount that would be equal to 10% of whatever I've already got saved in my retirement fund at 31st August, up to a maximum of 30,000. Let's just be clear that that doesn't mean that everybody can automatically access 30,000 on the 2nd of September. It does depend on what your entire savings amount is. So let's say your entire savings amount is, like Wayne said, 200,000 in your retirement fund on the 2nd of September. The seeded amount would be 10% of that, which would be 20,000. And similarly, if I had 2 million Rand saved, the 10% would be 200,000, but I would only be able to access 30,000. Did I get that right?
100% right. And if I may also add, Nisa, the other thing that cognizance, and it's important to take cognizance of this, is that whatever your amount might be, so as you said, whether it's the 30,000, which is the maximum, or whether it's the 20,000, as the examples you've sketched, it's not a neat or clean amount. And what I mean by that, it is subject to your marginal tax rates. And it's also probably going to be subject to administration costs. So, before you make that decision to access, it's important to factor all those things in. The other point I'd really also perhaps like to emphasize is that not everyone will have an amount that they may access, because there's the minimum value of 2,000 Rand. So to put it differently, if your fund value is under 20,000 in your fund, you will not be able to access anything, at this point in time. And as I said, it's 2,000 Rand. And of course, the other caveat is that you may only access this once a year.
Yes. Okay. That's an excellent point. Thanks, Zarina. Wayne, Zarina touched on, and that's a very good point that, you're not going to access a clean 20,000 or whatever the amount is that you've set your heart on. You need to make allowances that there's going to be not withdrawal tax based on your marginal rate of income. So if you currently in the 35% tax bracket, that's the tax you're going to get charged on this withdrawal. And there are also administration fees. What are we looking at in terms of administration fees? I'm aware that it might vary from provider to provider, but what are the current ranges? Do you have any kind of guide you could give us?
So I think, some of it's unknown because it's, so I think that there are two levels of, well, maybe several, but I'll do them in two broad themes. There's the cost of building this infrastructure to be able to do that. And in all likelihood, this is going to be somehow, and I mean, I think there's just business reality, transferred to members somewhere along the line in some. So that's just ongoing, maintaining this whole system, maintaining your record in a way that will allow you to access your seeding pot. And then I think the other cost element you're talking about would be, if I make this decision, what costs are associated with taking the money. And it generally is some transactional cost that I've been made aware of, and the fees have gone from zero because people have absorbed it into their development and they just say it's part of their normal business, up to a couple of $100 for each one of these transactions. And I'd say the cost that I've heard the most is around the 300-400 rand a transaction. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that because Serena covered the tax. I mean, and that's the other big thing to bear in mind when you're calculating, what it is that you can take and what it is that you want to take.
So we've got some lovely reader questions and feedback coming through, or viewer questions or feedback coming through already. Mamedo Letsoka wants to know, is it per calendar year or tax year when it comes to withdrawals? I would think tax year, Zarina.
Correct.
And then
sorry, I should have clarified that's tax year.
Tax year. So February to February. And then the other question I have that I think is quite interesting, for members over 55, does 10% automatically move to my savings pot, or do I have the option to say, actually, I don't want anything in the savings pot. I want to just keep everything fully invested?
Zarina, I don't know if you want to go.
Zarina.
So the quick answer is you're not automatically included. So members 58 years old now, because it would have been if you were 55 in March 2021, aren't automatically included in this new system, and it's a question of opting in rather than a question of opting out.
Okay, well, that's great news.
But sorry, Nisa, if I may just come in on that as well, to further clarify. So that is in respect of Provident Fund members, right?
Yes, that's
so it's not in respect of pension fund or other retirement fund members. That's specifically applicable to your Provident Fund members who are 58 and over. So they have the right to opt in if they so wish. And of course, they also don't have to, and then they'll continue as per normal, and they can commute the entire benefit in cash, and they can still receive contributions in their fund as per the pre-March 2021 regime that was in place.
Okay, and then for the pension fund and retirement annuity members?
No, that has not been carved out in that manner. So that is so. In other words, to put it differently, everyone else is subject to the two-part system, but there is that carve out for Provident Fund members who were 55 years of age on the 1st of March 2021 and older.
And there was a reason for that. For that, and I mean, thank you, Zarina, for that clarity. There is that. Remember, we spoke about vested rights and all those things. These members over 55, if they're still in the same fund, still have all the benefits. And I mean, I don't know if we want to get into the detail of what a pension and provident fund is, but they still retain all their provident fund rights that they have right until the day they retire.
Okay. So they
Yeah.
stay under the old regime, like until they retire and they're not affected, which makes sense because you're so close to retirement. I mean, you don't want to start messing around with your
Yeah.
investments.
No,
I think
indeed.
one
But
of the other,
sorry, maybe just one other thing, Nisa, on the provident fund, just so that sorry, I
yes,
now missed it out earlier. So what is also a requirement is that you must have been in the same fund, in on 1 September 2024 that you were in on the 1st of March 2021 in order to opt in.
okay, got it. And then just in terms of the withdrawal limits, so we talked about the seed funding, and in this, like from 1st of September this year, you can withdraw 10% of what you have up to a maximum of 30,000 Rand. Let's just clarify, in September 2025, like in the second year of the system, does that 30,000 Rand maximum withdrawal still apply, or how will that change? Wayne?
Oh, Wayne. All right. So they remember we've got our 1/3 that we're contributing. So if I'm contributing, I'm just going to use an easy number, 9,000 Rand a month. 6,000 of that's going to go to my retirement pot, and 3,000 of that's going to go to the savings pot. So in a year's time, I would have accumulated 36,000, and that would be the money that I have access to at that point. So obviously, if I have higher contributions or lower contributions, it's going to impact on what's in that savings pot. So that initial 30,000 is just about giving some money into that pot to get it started. Yeah.
Okay, and then Zarina, do you foresee any problems with that? What are the implications for retirement fund members who are planning to access this withdrawal, or even possibly viewing this as an emergency fund?
Well, my response to that would be, Nisa, that this shouldn't be treated as an ATM. Remember, the nature of retirement funds is that it's a long-term investment and it must be treated as such. It's supposed to provide us with a comfortable retirement when we reach that age, and so that we retire comfortably, that we have the necessary replacement ratios that we need to live comfortably, to sustain the lifestyles that we now enjoy whilst working. So I think when members make that decision, it must really, really only be accessed in cases of emergencies. That's one thing I would say. It shouldn't be your go-to, because of course it will have a negative impact on your income replacement ratios if you do access it. So there are consequences. So there's, as I've canvassed before, there are the tax consequences, and that's significant. I mean, if you go through, the marginal tax rates, they're quite high. Then, and I know Wayne has said, or maybe, some of the members of IRFA, charge between 300 and 450. I've also seen 500 Rand. I'm just saying by way of example. So it's your marginal tax rate plus that 500 Rand, and you can easily lob off a significant amount. So that already should be a sweat factor, or a factor that makes you think twice, to not withdraw. And then, of course, it has a negative or deleterious impact on your overall benefit upon retirement. So it really, really should only be used in cases of emergencies.
An absolute last resort. I think the intention is the COVID type of scenario, not I need to service my car scenario.
Yes.
And then, yeah, guess what I did last week? The other question I have, I think, from Nadia Galloway, which is a really good point. So she raises the point, what if she has, say, more than one retirement investment? She has a retirement annuity and a group retirement scheme. Does the 10% 30,000 Rand limit apply to each contract or each fund, or will it be a holistic thing? And who's going to monitor that? Wayne?
Yeah, no, I'll jump in there. It's going to be for each contract. So the law says contract. So if I'm a member of 5 funds, the 30,000 is going to apply to each one of those 5 funds individually.
Okay,
So
that's
so in theory, I have opportunity to access five savings elements if I want to.
That's a significant amount for people who have more than one retirement savings investment, although I wouldn't advise it even then. And then in earlier this year, we heard the finance minister saying that he is expecting tax revenue of 5 billion rand from this system in the next year. Is that realistic? And Wayne, are retirement funds bracing for a run on the amounts available?
So I think that the 5 billion is some projection. I know it was in the budget review. I'm not entirely sure how the minister calculated that on the basis, but it was definitely there. And then I think the bracing of administrators, yes, they definitely bracing themselves for this. I think the biggest thing is that for many administrators, this is going to be, I want to use a silly example, but like 50 times more activity than they would usually have for a month. So maybe if they had 100 claims a month, all of a sudden they're now going to have 5,000 claims to process. So it's very important for the administrators to develop an infrastructure that can manage all these claims as seamlessly as possible. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way of putting it. Yeah.
Putting it. Yes, I think it's been a cumbersome process, which is why I think the implementation date was such a topic of such conversation, moving up and down, and it went from 1st September, it went to March 2025, and then it came back. And but Zarina, I want to chat about the rule amendment application. So my understanding is that all retirement funds had to submit rule amendment applications to the FSCA by a certain date in order for this to happen. I believe the date is end of July. How many applications have you received and how many are outstanding?
Okay, so Nisa, that's a very critical question, because in order to give effect to the two-part system, rule amendments have to be registered and approved by the FSCA. So without that, it won't be, you won't be able to implement the two-part system. Thus far, we've received 131 draft rule amendments for consideration, and there are just under 900 active funds that are required to, in total. So you can see that over 700 funds still need to submit their rule amendments. But our division, the Retirement Fund Supervision Division, has inquired and engaged administrators and funds, etc., just to see, where they are in the process. So some of the feedback that has been given is that they're just waiting for the board meetings, some of them mid-July, that will be taking place before they submit the rule amendments. The other thing we've heard is that some funds, but it should really not stop them, but they're waiting for the Pension Funds Amendment Bill 2024 that's currently with the President for assent. They're waiting for that to be promulgated before they'll submit. But that should really not hold anyone back from submission, because it's not as if we will approve and register the rules before that legislation comes into effect. But what we are doing, of course, at the FSCA, we're doing the back end work, the Reviews and Authorizations Department, where they're going through the rule amendments. If there are queries, addressing the queries with the funds, with the administrators. So the sooner they can get it in, Nisa, the better. So that, because remember, just given the numbers I've given you, and over 700 still to come in one, it's a quite a significant volume of rule amendments, and they generally have not been short, understandably. It's relatively long. So please don't wait until the last minute. If you are administrators on this platform or funds or even trustees, etc., you must, or even if you're a member, check with your fund. Have you submitted the rule amendments to give effect to the two-part system to the FSCA yet?
And I'm assuming, sorry, in that process that you have already approved some of those rule amendments. And I think it would be very naive. No, are you shaking your head to say no?
No. As I said, Nisa, we cannot approve before the Pension Funds Amendment Bill has been promulgated into law.
Okay.
But we have what my colleague, Mrs. Musoma, and her team, what they've been doing is obviously, as I said, going through the draft rule amendments, looking at whether, they pass muster, so that when PFAB is eventually enacted, there's not going to be any delay. But once that has been promulgated, then certainly it will flow from our side. But we cannot, it would be legally incorrect to actually, approve them before the Pension Funds Amendment Bill has been enacted.
And then Ricky Pooney wants to know, Wayne, what about people who are already in retirement? Is there any provision made for them, or does this affect them in any way? I would assume not.
The simple answer is no.
Yes, I'm assuming so. Say somebody's already retired and they've taken out a living annuity or a guaranteed annuity, that continues as is, and there's absolutely no effect for them.
No, they're no longer a member of the fund. That's the important requirement.
Yes, exactly. And then somebody wants to know, if I decide to resign in December, what happens?
Okay, so if you decide, and let's hope you don't decide to resign, but given the state of the economy, if you were to resign, what you will be able to say, so hypothetically, if you've taken your seeding amount, right? So say you've taken, let's just go with the 30,000. Say you've taken 30,000 out of your savings pot, but you resign in December. You will then, upon resignation, what you will be able to access is your vested pot. Because remember, as we discussed, that, and it's a tried principle of our law, the law generally does not interfere with vested rights or and vested benefits. So your vested, that vested pot, you'll still be able to access in cash if you so wished. I mean, it would be foolish to do that because, as I said, retirement is, has a specific purpose and it's a long-term investment. But if you absolutely wanted to do that, you can still take. So to put it differently, people should not be in a rush to try to access their money now, because whatever is vested up to 31 August 2024, whether he resigns in December, whether he resigns or she resigns next year, 5 years, etc., as long as it's before retirement, he or she can still take that entire benefit in cash, should he so wish. I mean, whether it is a good idea, that's a discussion for another day. Also another scenario, Nisa, in that case, what if he didn't access anything from his savings pot, during the seeding, because say he decides, you know what, 30,000, it's really not worth it. What am I going to do with it? When he resigns, though, he could also, if he still had the 30,000 in his save, he didn't touch it, he could still access his vested pot together with the 30,000 Rand savings pot. So that is how it would work in December.
So just to clarify on that, because you brought in the 30,000, and there's a viewer who's asked, let's say in next year, I don't withdraw that maximum 30,000. I have it available, but I don't withdraw it. Does it roll over to the following year?
Yes, it does. Yes, sir. The short answer does. It's not like I said to my colleagues at the FSCA, it's not like our leave, which if you don't use it, you lose it. It rolls over. And you see, I think that is the beauty of it. And that's why, there should be no rush, as I said, and I can't emphasize this enough, to really, just try and get, your hands on the savings. Because remember, both pots will draw investment return the longer you have your funds there. And the beauty and power of retirement funds also is that obviously, you benefit from compounding. You benefit, of course, from the investment returns. And it's there. It's not as if you're going to lose it.
So I just want to clarify with an example to make it absolutely clear for our viewers. Let's say, so 1st of September or 2nd of September comes, and now I've got enough in my retirement fund that I have access to the full 30,000 limit, the seeding amount, and I don't withdraw it. And now we're going into September, October 2025. I've been contributing, we'll go with a very low amount of 3,000 Rand a month, which means 1,000 Rand a month will be going towards my savings pot. So I'm trying to speak slowly so everybody can follow here. So 1,000 Rand a month is going to my savings pot. So in the first year of this new system, I've contributed 12,000 to my savings pot. In October 2025, am I correct in thinking I will have access to 30,000 plus 12,000 equaled 42,000 Rand? Is that right?
Correct. Okay. Correct.
Okay, great. And then let's see, how does this practically look if somebody is managing their own retirement annuities? So if I'm a freelancer and I've got access to more than one retirement savings thing, but I don't necessarily have a group structure, who administrates or tracks my two pots?
The administrator. The administrator, exactly the same job.
In that case, you still have an administrator.
Yeah. So it will be whoever manages the records of the fund.
Bruce Hokin asks I think it's a really technical question, Wayne. I'm going to give it to you. He wants to know, discuss the relevance of the net retirement ratio now that 1/3 is being taken or not.
Sure, it's a big one, and there luckily a few calculators out there. So I think I'm going to preface this with maybe a thought, and then we'll get to the practical answer. Is just I think one of the other benefits, if you want to call it, of the two-pot system is that people really now need to engage with every decision they make when they withdraw. So I think for a lot of people, they're quite disengaged with their retirement benefits until they resign or get close to retirement. Then there's this need to engage. With the access pot, people are now going to have to probably, hopefully, consider the consequences of that decision. And when Bruce talks about the 1/3, the 2/3, and 2/3, in my mind that it talks about what we know at the moment. So if I'm a pension fund member or a retirement annuity member, and bit of my new provident fund stuff, but I want to get too confusing. When I get to retirement, I was historically entitled to take 1/3 of that money in cash, pay tax on it in a special tax way, not my average tax, and then the other money I needed to invest to get a pension. In effect, the system is agile enough to allow you to still do exactly that and still access all those benefits if you're not accessing it before retirement. Remember, the tax is always going to be about, am I doing it now or am I doing it at retirement, and that impact. So hopefully that gives an answer. If you leave your money, you can effectively still do that and still access and benefit from those tax benefits. And obviously, taking money, what Bruce was asking is the impact. If I take money before retirement, I'm obviously going to have less money to grow and less money to have when I get, and will have less money when I get to retirement.
And then I think let's touch on one of the questions I had planned, or the points I wanted to touch on. So Nina, I know that when it comes to savings and investments, we always talk about the long term and the short term and the medium term, and there's different investment strategies depending on what you're investing for. So now that kind of shifts the scenario, because with the two-pot system, 2/3 is my retirement savings, and that's a long-term investment strategy. And the 1/3 is a savings pot that I could withdraw from once a year. So how does this affect my retirement fund investment strategy overall?
Okay, so of course, because there's going to be, withdrawals, the investment manager or asset manager of a fund will take that into account. Again, funds are still long-term investment vehicles, as we know, and the strategies generally are aligned to that. But of course, it has to be factored in that members may now access. But even though obviously I don't speak as an investment manager, but I do think that it's going to be fund dependent. And it's probably also going to be a bit of a watch and see to see how many people access. You look at the composition of your fund membership, etc. So I think that whilst it has to be a factor to be considered, it doesn't necessarily mean that immediately funds will, drastically alter their investment strategies. But I must also just, say this, that I did to this is that generally we don't, as the FSCA say, this is how you should invest, etc. Of course, unless there's some mala fides going on, something, really wonky happening. But the investment managers, I'm sure, are quite cognizant that we've got the two-pot happening, the seeding is happening, and that you've got the 1/3. So they may, it may be decisions along the lines, Nisa, of maybe, putting more money going forward in the money market, or, another approach might be disinvesting. But it really is, fun. I would say it is fund specific, and it's probably going to potentially be a watch and see.
That makes absolute sense. Wayne, we've got Pat who asks, and I think this ties in a little bit to the last question you had. But if I withdraw from that savings pot, how does that impact on the 550,000 rand tax-free withdrawal allowed on retirement?
And from our previous conversation, we've got two things happening here. Once I retire and there's a certain tax, I pay certain types of taxes. One, I haven't retired and I'm still working and I would just want to access the money. So when that 550,000 limit relates to when I retire, and so in that case, it wouldn't have you wouldn't be affected. It wouldn't affect the 550,000 unless, of course, you've taken some of that money before, if maybe
so I think that's what
2020 when you resigned, you took some of it. So that would come off. But if you've never taken any money, you'll have your 550 available when you get to retirement, and you can use it to reduce your tax liability for the 1/3 or whatever cash you're taking.
So let's say I'm retired, I'm invested now in a retirement fund, and I've never made any withdrawals, and I'm going into this with R1 million at 1st of September 2024, and then I start contributing and I withdraw 30,000 rand next year. Does that 30,000 rand get deducted from the 550,000 tax-free, or it doesn't touch that? It actually just gets taxed immediately, marginal rate of tax.
My tax rate is increased because my income is now increased. So if my income was 100,000 and I'm taking the 30 next year, when I do my next shot, they're going to say, oh, well, your income last year was 130,000, and whatever that impact is on your tax bracket.
Yes. And then Kolofelo wants to know, does the two-pot regime also apply to preservation funds? I think my answer would be no, it does not. You can't withdraw from your preservation funds.
I know, but let Serena answer the difficult question.
No, so it is applicable to preservation funds as well. So the two-pot is applicable. There are only a couple of funds that it's not applicable to. So that's your beneficiary funds, your unclaimed benefit funds, your dormant or closed funds, and legacy retirement annuity funds. But save for that, that carve out or those carve outs, all other funds are to be subjected to the two component system.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I learned something today that's so I have to admit I've got my savings hat on and I'm very much in favor of saving for retirement and staying focused on that because I'm very aware of the costs in retirement. And I think that's quite a scary thing that preservation funds are open. Um, Nadia Galloway wants to know if the FSCA has the capacity. Are you confident about managing the process with such a large amount of fund applications still outstanding?
Well, we are quite confident. Remember, as you touched on earlier, Nisa, this was supposed to have, taken place in 2023 already, right? The two-pot system. So we've already capacitated our officers with additional staff members, experienced staff members, to attend to the two pot system rule amendments. And we have in our communication asked that funds and administrators only submit the two-pot rule amendments. So as long as it comes in, during July, and the reason I'm saying July, just to give our colleagues sufficient time to basically review the draft amendments. It should be sufficient time. But I must say, if it's later than July, it starts becoming more and more difficult, as you can imagine, given the volumes that still has to be dealt with. But we are
Okay.
capacitated. So from our side, at this juncture, we're not that concerned. And given our engagements as well, Nisa, with the administrators, with the funds, they have indicated it is coming. I think what will be a good indicator will be the end of this month, to be perfectly honest, to see how many has come in by the end of the month. And then again, the 15th, because as I said, our communication did say, please submit by the 15th. So it will be, and very often, I don't know if it's human nature, human behavior, call it what you like, but often people leave this to the last minute. So that will also be very telling. But look, we will be doing gentle reminders, which are possibly not so gentle reminders, but to submit rule amendments.
Absolutely. And then Richard Holmes, yes, you are quite right. At the end of that first year example I used earlier, you wouldn't have access to just 12,000. It would be 12,000 plus whatever investment returns on your savings pot in that first year. And then we've got quite a lot of questions coming in. I think the last one I want to ask before we head over to all the reader queries is, what do I need to do as a retirement fund member? We've talked about the FSCA handling the rule amendment applications and the retirement funds getting ready for the administrative costs and complications that come in with the new system. What do retirement fund members need to do?
Look, so Nina, I'll jump in. I think and please jump in as well. I think the first thing is you need to educate yourself about the consequences of your actions. You can do nothing. I think that's the first thing to say. You can do nothing and just let it sit there. If you want to engage and ask questions, access some of the money, think very carefully and understand the full impact of what you're doing. There are tools out there. My preference would be if you have access and you have the resources, probably speak to a financial advisor to guide you properly through the whole process.
Absolutely. And I think also maybe make sure that you're in touch with your retirement fund administrator, that they've got the correct contact details on the database.
Yeah. The other thing, Lisa, that the other, sorry, if I may interject. So
Yeah.
the other thing that, especially if you're not, you may not be, inclined to have a financial advisor, because of course that comes at a cost. Each fund is required to have a retirement benefits counselor who shares, who has information. So I would also then, even before, I go to the financial advisor, I would consult the retirement benefits counselor, to share the information so that I am equipped, so that I have the knowledge to make an informed decision. If you still feel uncertain after that, by all means, I think, seek out the advice of a financial advisor. But my first port of call would certainly be, firstly, I think Wayne is right. Know your rights, know your obligations, try to formulate some understanding of what the two-pot legislation means for you at a practical level, but also know your, as I said, know your obligations. Don't make rash decisions. Now we can access, don't rush to access. It will have a deleterious or negative impact, as I've said, on your benefit. So really make your decisions wisely.
Absolutely. I have to say thank you to our viewers. The interaction and the feedback is great. The questions, I think, are a lot more complicated than our guests anticipated today. Graham Nell wants to know what happens if the legislation isn't promulgated by August?
Oh, look,
Not an unreasonable question, I think.
yeah, look, unfortunately, it is out of our hands, even though all indications, I can just speak about indications by National Treasury has been that the signature by the president is imminent, right? So fortunately, our lab, as you may know, the Revenue Laws Amendment Bill, as I said, has been enacted. It's now the Laws Amendment Act of 2024. So one piece of legislation has been enacted. We're just waiting for the Pension Funds Amendment Bill to be enacted. It's gone through both houses of Parliament. It's gone, it's gone through the National Assembly. It's gone through NCOP. So it really, really just waits the president's assent, so the president's signature. So I cannot anticipate that it's going to be that late. But Nisa, I can't. Unfortunately, it's above my pay grade. But it's anticipated that it will be time. Yes.
Okay, and then sure, there's so many questions here. So Lishan wants to know, let's say I have vested rights in my retirement fund and I then resign and I go to a new retirement fund. Will the vested rights carry over to that new fund if I change jobs?
If you wish, yes, because you have, in that case scenario, you have two options. You may transfer the amount because you remember you may transfer the vested pot to another vested pot. In fact, you can transfer all three pots across, right? Or you, in the case of the vested pot, of course, as we discussed, if it's before retirement, he or she may withdraw that in cash, which is, of course, not recommended.
Okay, and then Robert Coombe wants to just confirm the date in 2021 at which you needed to be 55 to not be impacted by the two-pot system. And I believe that date is the 1st of March. Wayne, am I right? Yes, it's my birthday, Robert. So 1st of March, 2021, if you were not 55, which I wasn't, then you're not affected. If you were 55 at the 1st of March, 2021, then two-pot doesn't affect you. You don't need to worry about it. Everything stays exactly as it was before. Joan Ferreira asked if SARS has indicated whether they're ready for all the tax directives for all these withdrawals. And I'm afraid nobody on this forum can answer that right now. That would be definitely a question for SARS, and I'll try and get that off to them and use it in the article that I write up next week. Zarina Sudesh Pandey wants to know if you could just quickly review how and what applies to beneficiary funds, what works for them going forward. How does it work?
Okay, so as I've indicated, beneficiary funds has been carved out. So the two-pot system does not apply to beneficiary funds in the same way as it doesn't apply to unclaimed benefit funds.
Absolutely. And then Wayne, I think I'm going to give you this question. What happens to in future in the event of a member's divorce? I think there is a little bit of a gray area here. So let's just preface the answer with that. But the question is, will the spouse have a claim against the retirement pot of the other member, the actual member spouse?
Look, and Zarina, jump in. Maybe my understanding is wrong here. If I just your pension interest, that's the thing that they call it when they look at your divorce orders and stuff. is whatever your benefit is in the fund. It's not, the way it's paid might be carved out from the various pots or whatever, but
Yeah.
that is what that's what your spouse will be entitled to, a portion of
So,
that.
so if I may come in, Nisa, on
Yeah.
that, to add to what Wayne has said. So what the legislation provides is that you will be the Section 37D deduction of the pension interest, which Wayne has explained. It will be across all pots proportionately. So that is what will happen. So yes, there will be a deduction from your retirement pot, from your savings pot, from your vested pot. So there's nothing, to put it differently, there's nothing particularly new about how this will operate. Safe to say that it's now across all three pots.
And then I think we've got a poll running in the group, and 18% of the viewers have indicated that they're not sure yet whether they will be making any withdrawals after the 1st of September. And I think we have dealt with this, but I just want to reiterate, if the 1st of September, or even, further down the line, whatever year it is, you decide to withdraw, say, 30,000 Rand from your retirement fund, from your savings pot, you've got to consider very carefully that it's not 30,000 Rand that you're withdrawing from your future self, because your future self, that 30,000 Rand would be worth a lot more if you just left it invested for the long term.
Couldn't agree with you more. No, we couldn't
Okay.
agree. I think both of us couldn't agree with you more.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think we are. No, so Elijah says he's 60 years old and a member of a provident fund. And I think if you're 60 years old now, that means you were older than 55 in March 2021. So Elijah, it wouldn't apply to you at all. You wouldn't have a savings pot. You would just have the normal retirement savings that you had before. I think there are quite a few questions that we've basically addressed. I think the one is, if I'm retrenched, what can I access?
That's a tough one. No, not a tough one. We know what you can access. So I mean, Zarina, I'm jumping in, but please go for it. I just wanted to say it's a tough one. There's still some work being done around that one.
Yeah, but thanks for that, Wayne. But if I may just say that in terms of the current legislation, so in other words, in terms of the Revenue Laws Amendment Act that has been enacted, you may not access your retirement pot, when you are retrenched. Because remember, the whole point, of course, is, as I said, one of the main points is really that we have preservation. So you'll only be able to access your retirement pot upon retirement, not retrenchment, not dismissal, not whatever, mutual separation, any of the other terminations, save for you ending at retirement. You won't be able to access your retirement pot. That's the short answer. But having said that, as I've indicated earlier, you will be able to access your savings pot if you haven't withdrawn from that, or whatever balance might be in there. And of course, you may also access your vested pot. So you still have access in cash, if that's what your wish is.
Yeah. Okay, I think that was the question. And Greg wants to know, how will the government employees pension fund be impacted? I believe that the government employee pension fund will be subject to the two-pot system, just like any other retirement fund. I think the calculation will probably be slightly different, Greg, given that they're a defined benefits fund, unlike other funds that are defined contribution funds. The other question was, not a question, but a point I think it's valid to raise. When it comes to your own taxes, you need to make sure your taxes are in order before you apply for the savings pot withdrawal. Because let's say you had a tax amount owing to SARS of 15,000 Rand, and then you want to withdraw your 30,000 Rand maximum. I think people need to know SARS is going to deduct that outstanding tax due before you get any money paid over to you.
Yes, for sure.
100%. Yes. And they've indicated that that they definitely will, and they're entitled to do that. So you must ensure that your tax affairs are in order, because otherwise you won't just be paying your marginal tax rate. You'll also be furnishing what is outstanding to SARS.
Wow, I think that's significant. I mean, that could really eat into that amount that you're planning to withdraw. And then the other comment I want to make is I wonder how many people will be accessing the savings pot to offset the money they owe SARS, not to get a lump sum for themselves, but to
Yeah.
pay SARS and have that headache off their table. The other point I want to raise is that I did interview quite a few fund administrators, over the last year, talking about this two-part system. And one of the very interesting comments that came out was that if you refrain from accessing your retirement funds prematurely, like withdrawing from the savings pot or making an early withdrawal, you could potentially accumulate 12 times your annual salary. That was a comment from Old Mutual, which I think is a mind-boggling amount and ties into what I was saying earlier. Zarina, how many do you, or will Wayne, I'm not sure which one of you would have access, how many people actually access their retirement savings early currently? Do we have any idea?
I don't know if Wayne has figures. I must say I don't have figures at hand, but what I will say is that most people do access it. And
So,
as I've said, because as I indicated, the 6% of South Africans that can retire comfortably, I think that figure has been static for years. And most evidence that, or anecdotal, but is that most people access their benefits when they resign, or whether they are whether they're dismissed, whether they're retrenched. And I think the beauty of the two-part system is that at least will change, because you will then be compelled not to take your full you can't take, in fact, you can't take your full withdrawal benefit, so to say, because 2/3 will be compulsorily preserved.
Yes.
But unfortunately, Nisa, I don't have stats,
I think if you
statistics for
look
you.
at some of the reports from some of the administrators, and I don't know if you heard these, and it varies again from the kind of fund, the kind of employer, but I would say with relative confidence over the years, less than 10% of people actually preserve.
Okay.
They
Actually preserve.
So most people, when they change jobs, withdraw their full benefit.
Okay, I think we've only got about 3 minutes left in the session. Thank you very much, Wayne and Zarina, for making yourselves available and for fielding the many questions that we got. I think the number of questions and interaction that came through just kind of highlights how many people want to know and how much people still have questions about this whole two-part retirement reform, and the complicated aspects that come in with that. So I think we're going to end off there unless there's anything. Wayne, do you have any final comments?
I think this is a good thing, and just make wise decisions.
And Zarina?
Yes, I would also say, tread carefully. This is, I think it is it's an initiative which we support, but tread very carefully. Don't make withdrawals rashly unless you absolutely have to, and know that ultimately we want to retire comfortably. We want to shift away from being dependent on our children during old age, and so that we can have a dignified retirement. But from my side also, thank you very much for affording the FSCA an opportunity on your platform. It's much appreciated, and thank you very much to the attendees for their lively and interesting questions and your engagement. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to say goodbye to our Daily Maverick viewers.